I believe that the Zodiac killer is actually two people. Now let's look at a basic timeline, starting with the first murder, and we'll call this killer Killer A. This murder screams of a crime of passion. The killer spent over an hour with the victim, beating her, ultimately stabbing her so savagely that her head was almost severed. Based on the notes found in the library, the poem, they call it a poem, written on the desk, and the note itself saying there will be more. This is a person crying out for help, I believe this person turned to a friend, a family member, somebody very, very close to him, and confessed what he did. Over 2 years passed by, and I believe it was Killer B that stepped up and did the next murders, for reasons I'll spell out later. So as we see, the M.O. was quite different from the first murder. And I think the biggest clue is that there was no letter sent. I believe it was at this time that Killer B told Killer A, you see how easy that was with the gun? I just killed two people like really easy. So now it's your turn to try it. Very similar M.O. to the last set of murders, but this time the killer seems less accurate with the pistol, less proficient. In fact, one of the two victims survives. Also, how come a letter was written this time and it wasn't written last time? That's because the very first murder was committed by Killer A, and his thing is writing letters like a cat and mouse game. The second set of murders, where two people were killed, there was no letter written because it wasn't the same killer. That's not his thing. Now, the third murders happened, and now there's a letter. But since they're working as a team, Killer B told Killer A, you better take claim to the other murders too, otherwise they'll know it's two different people. You understand? We see an evolution of sorts in Killer A's M.O. He uses the gun to subdue, but he goes back to his knife to do the actual deed. But he makes a mistake and leaves Brian Hartnell alive. And Brian gives a description to the police. Only a couple of weeks go by, and let's see what happens next. And I believe this to be very, very important. I find it interesting that every time you hear Mr. Stein mentioned, he's just dismissed as the cab driver, the wrong place at the wrong time. But in the early 60s, he was a reporter, as you can see by the picture. He was married in 1967, so things seem to be going good for him. What happened? Did he lose his job and now he's a cab driver? Or was he doing the cab driver to make extra dough? You know, was he driving the cab as some kind of undercover, doing a big story? You know, trying to solve this crazy case. Man, maybe he figured he could be undercover as a cabbie and and get some information. What if he knew something about one of the killers? What if he purposely picked up this person that night to talk to him, to ask some questions? Now, keep in mind, up until this point, Killer B was never seen, but Killer A had been seen. So we would imagine that Killer A, being smart, the mastermind of the Zodiac messages, so he would have got rid of his costume, because if they would have suspected him and they went into his house and found that Zodiac gear, he was busted. So the jig was pretty much up right now for this team. Okay? So now we have Killer B in a cab with this guy that he recognizes as a reporter, or knows as a reporter. Okay? And this guy's talking about the Zodiac killer. I think Killer B got freaked out a little bit, and when he was supposed to stop the cab, he told him to go one more block. Maybe he didn't like being dropped off where the cabbie wanted to drop him, and then he blew him away. A block away, he killed him. And then he cut a swatch of his material off his shirt, wiped down the cab, and got the hell out of there. Okay, interesting here too, Killer B was also seen. Okay, but now remember the description, okay, of Killer A, and now we'll see the description of Killer B. Now, obviously, you can see it's two different people. Now, I would take this police officer's word. He's a trained professional. He describes the man as being taller, okay? And he even gave a great description where they ran with it and printed up posters and everything. And as you can see, it clearly looks just like Clint Eastwood, okay? Now, it might be considered a stretch, but if you are on the police team trying to solve this, you have to start to make a profile. And what you would do is make a list. Let's start with a very rudimentary one of 5 things. That this killer lives in and knows the area very well. A white male, 30 to 45 years old, 5'8" to 6'2", based on the different reports. Military training, very smart. Knowledge of cars and how they work. Clint Eastwood, you could check off all those boxes for him. Okay? He has all those attributes. The question remains, why would Clint Eastwood do such a thing? Okay? Well, somebody close to him did a murder and confided in him. He maybe calmed the person down, said, don't be doing this no more, you're going to get in trouble, it's not right to kill people, this and that. Okay, this person is very, very, very close to Clint Eastwood. A brother, a cousin, an army buddy, somebody he grew up with, somebody that would trust Clint Eastwood with this secret. What if an evil plot was hatched? Dirty Harry was in the works and going to be coming out in 1971. What if there was real-life murders very similar? Would that drum up interest in the movie? In the movie, the killer was called Scorpio. Okay? In some of the letters, children were threatened on school buses, just like in the movie Dirty Harry. And to me, the biggest clue that Clint Eastwood is involved is this. How come this Zodiac killer that craved attention so much, that wanted to see his letters on the front page of newspapers or he'd kill, all right, he really craved attention. How come he never in a letter made any mention of the Dirty Harry film? How come? Okay? A big star that lives in the same area, that comes from the same area as you, where you've been killing people, he makes a movie and you don't mention it in any letters. Okay? I find that very interesting. Maybe because by even mentioning Dirty Harry in one of the Zodiac letters, that would draw attention to Clint Eastwood and his partner. Okay? Again, I find that very interesting that the Zodiac never made mention of Dirty Harry. But he does mention The Exorcist in a letter. That's interesting. Did you know that Clint Eastwood's good buddy Lalo Schifrin was supposed to do the score for The Exorcist, but he was fired because his music was deemed too scary? So he makes no mention of Dirty Harry, which was pretty much based on him, but he feels the need to take a pot shot at The Exorcist. Could this be another example of Clint Eastwood being really loyal to those he loves, his friends and family?